I want to share an example about a local economy example that I had when I moved to Mexico. I moved to Mexico and lived in the south, in the state of Oaxaca, where I lived with my husband when I first arrived, and his parents. And they had some land and had some cows, a few sheep, fruit trees, what have you. And I loved to observe how every day they would be selling a variety of things. I have to say, it's not like they were self-sufficient or anything. They'd had other jobs or retired, but they were still selling from their farm. And they would be selling firewood, fresh milk from their cows, fresh cheese, surplus fruit, in-season fruit, and sometimes meat. And my mother-in-law has this little wooden chest, and when people would come to the door, she would put the money into that wooden chest. And also to that door would come people that would be selling fresh fish, living close to the ocean, shrimp, tortillas made by hand, tamales, fresh flowers, homemade chocolate for drinking chocolate, a whole host of products. And from that same chest, the money would go out again. And now just observe that every single day. So this is like my mental picture for a local economy of how the money circulates within the economy to provide meaningful livelihoods for people there, that of course has ripple effects all through the economy. It sustains farming, it sustains artisans, and that is the exact opposite of what happens when we are, I'd say, forced to shop, many of us, in big change. The money goes out. It's like a leaking bucket. You know, the big chain, Starbucks, is not going to go around spending their money locally. They're going to take it out and invest it elsewhere, for example. No? And in terms of circulating money locally, as I was just mentioned from Mexico, that's the same thing that happens if we go to a farmer's market, for example. There are studies that show if you go into a farmer's market and buy directly from a farmer or in some other way, the money stays within the local community 10 times longer than if you spent the same money in a chain store. No? Or if you buy from an independent retailer, maybe not even local products, that money is likely to stay 3.5 times longer within your local community. And that means more jobs, that means more schools, it means more taxes, it means more community. So it's something really important to keep in mind also, that localization, at least that's something we are faced with often, is that it's not about going back in time, and it's not about bringing everything down to a village level either. But it is about shifting a direction away from the global. And here I'm thinking particularly these deregulated transnational corporations that have been allowed to have more power really than nation states, more wealth. Many of these private companies are wealthier than a single country. So it's shifting power away again from the transnational corporations to nation states while building up regional self-reliance. That is a process of localization. And how can we do that? Well, using the same mechanism, using our taxes, our subsidies and regulations to support the needs of people, of communities, and not big business. And we also need, in that process, to re-regulate the banks and business, take back some of that immense freedom to roam and rob, so that they're subject to democratic control and ecological limits. And there's a principle called subsidiarity, which I think is key in localization. It's a principle of social organization, I'm reading here, that maintains the social and political issues should be addressed at the most immediate level consistent with their resolution. So it's more about direct democracy closer to home, taking the decisions closer to where they are having an impact. And the same thing with production. You may know with sort of within the local food movements, you often find that local food, well, it's defined in different ways in different places, but vegetables and fruit you might expect to get within a 50 or 100 kilometer range. Grains, you might have to go a bit further away. Oil, a bit further away. When you're talking about industrial products like steel, further away. 10 minutes, okay, thank you. But it's about producing for our basic needs closer to home. It's totally illogical to be depending for our basic needs on global trade, or to be expecting that people on the other side of the world should sacrifice their best lands to producing for somebody else, no? We all have the right to produce for our basic needs and sell the surplus, maybe to a national market, international market. So localization or shift in direction is a bit like a solution multiplier, because it helps us rebuild community, connect to place, reduce our ecological footprints, reduce our dependence on energy, reduce our emissions. And it's, as I said before, easier to see the consequence of our actions. It's easier to be someone that can have a positive impact, right, of healing our lands when you know it, when you're rooted there. And there's so much going on around the world that I want to share about. I've picked out a few. And I must say that I've been working on these issues for many decades. And like 2-3 decades ago, we were in the organization I work for, we're keeping like those like drawers, I can't remember, with the hanging files. And we'd have, for all the countries, we'd have, a little leaflet at that time. They were all little printed leaflets. Oh, there's this and that. And, in this country, there are 3 projects. We would sort of know about a lot of them. Now, it's impossible to keep track. And it's so wonderful because there's so much going on everywhere that we sadly don't get to hear about, which is one of the things that we need to get better at. So there are political changes happening, and there are community projects, and I'll just mention a few. I don't know if you heard about community wealth building. That is a way of using public procurement. That means public money to buy goods and services for government institutions. That's a really, really fast way to make change, to strengthen your local economy. You've got some money right there, you've got some consumers right there, quite big ones, and if you can, instead of buying from Amazon or what have you, buy the service and the goods from local producers, you're already strengthening the economy. So Cleveland, Ohio in the US, which is in the Rust Belt, has a population of 360,000. They did just that. They use what they call anchor institutions, which are hospitals, universities, and others, and tried to change their purchasing policy. They combine that with deciding of trying to buy sustainable products and buying from worker cooperatives. So that had, multiple impacts within that economy, quite immediate impacts. Preston, UK, it's a sort of kind of working class community in the north of England, a bit smaller, 150,000, that ended up almost like a boarded up town after the financial crisis in 2008, where a lot of the shops closed. And they have copied the same thing or developed their own model. It's known as the Preston model, where they are also using public procurement, about £1 million every year, that are geared towards buying services or good from worker cooperatives that are from Preston, generating much needed livelihoods and keeping the money within the community. Another example of public procurement from France, some of you that are from France here may know better. Oh, there we have, yeah. The territorial food projects. And I want to highlight one from, I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce this, Montserrat. Yeah, well, this is a town of 10,000 people. And they set themselves the task of providing food without pesticides in the schools in the town, 1,300 meals a day. Then they figured out, they couldn't find a way to guarantee that it was pesticide free, so they thought, well, we have to go with pure organic. And they wanted it to be as local as possible. So they're providing 100% organic food in schools, 70% of which is local. They started out by commissioning some farmers to produce organic food, and ended up also buying some land that are then now used also as a outdoor learning space for the children. Another example from Mexico, Tosepan, a big union of cooperatives, of 430 cooperatives, mostly farmers, covering 40,000 members in 2 states. Their name means United We Will Overcome. They live by, or guided by, Buen Vivir Yecnemilis, which is about cooperation and caring for the land. They use agroecology, and they are both renewing and resisting, you could say, because they are facing and have strong opposition to fracking, mining, a lot of the things, and managed to stop Walmart coming in. The local food movement is probably, I think, the movement that is leading the way in the localization. There are so many projects from all over the world, farmers markets, community-supported agriculture, community gardens, consumer co-ops, from Zimbabwe to China to Denmark. There are a lot of them. I'm short of time, so I can't really mention all. A lot of them may be in the workshop. There are a lot of local investment projects as well, where grassroots investment that goes towards lending money to small farmers, to new entrepreneurial projects that are helping to strengthen the local economy. And community land trusts that are managing to acquire and hold the land for place-based communities, for affordable housing, for shops, for community gardens. And of course, there are also some good news on the local decentralized energy scene that I could talk about. But sadly, I think mostly the renewable energy transition has been co-opted by large-scale corporations. And I will say that this has been going on for many years. There have been so much development on alternative energy by I would say people from outside the dominant system, and many of them had their businesses bought up and closed down. The lid caved on it until we had our back against the wall and were sort of forced to accept this is the process we're in. But anyway, we can talk more about that in the workshop, and also about alternative education. Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, there you go. So there's a bit more to come, but now we want to ask you a question. So just hearing everything that Anja was just sharing, and actually about how much is actually going on for making a change in the world, we are inviting you now to turn to a person in the room. So find a partner, ideally somebody you haven't talked to yet. And now, does everyone have a partner? Maybe we put our hands down again. If anybody doesn't have a partner, you can put a hand up, and you can find another person with a hand up. Great. All right. Now that you all have partners, yes, you will have around 2 minutes each to share with the other person. If you knew that you could not fail, what would you do in service to the earth? I'll repeat that. If you knew that you could not fail, what would you do in service to the earth? And the person with the longest hair starts.
What? Absolutely. Okay. Fine.
It's 5 to 11, so I'm just like, here it says the thing that changes 25 minutes. Maybe we'll switch the person now.
And now you can switch partner. We can switch partner. and come to a close. So you can finish your sentences. And come to a close. We love to hear that you have so much to share. And Anja also has a bit more that she would like to share. So we will hand over the word to Anja again, and then we will come back into this. Thank you.
Yeah, I will just say, in 2020, it was at the height of the COVID. I'm sure a lot of us had a change of plans, and sorry? All right. Okay, in 2020, my organization, Local Futures, were stranded like everybody else and couldn't do any of the things we had planned. And we were noticing that many of the things that we are talking about for years and that people had been rejecting as being naive or romanticizing the possibilities for change, people were then suddenly realizing, oh, there's some truth. We are very vulnerable when we are relying on our food from far away. Oh, it's great to have good neighbors and strong communities, and it's even more wonderful when somebody produces food around the corner. People realize that. So we decided, okay, we're not going to keep inactive or shut down, so we came up with something called World Localization Day as a way of trying to showcase how much is going on around the world and making that invisible, that it's sort of invisible movement visible. So we came up and we did a day-long program with 100 voices, with people from 5 continents. And we didn't really have any expectations as to people participating, but we had people tuning in from 191 countries. I think there are only about 250 countries in the world. No? And just gave us a sense that this is something that matters and that people can recognize the need for everywhere. No? And I also want to say here that it's very common that people turn to what's closest to them and they see the value in a time of crisis. And then we forget about it afterwards when things are normalized. Of course, nothing about our economy is normal, but it seems that when we are in this matrix that that's the norm, right? So this is localization is more than a lifeboat in a time of crisis. It is a lifeboat in a time of crisis, more than anything, but it's also a strategy for long-term change. No? And there are so many movements around the world that I would say are working for systemic change, maybe slightly different ways, and we're not good enough at working together to be seen and as a bigger force. One I want to mention is La Via Campesina. It is the biggest grassroots movement in the world, representing 220 million small-scale farmers, peasant land workers from around the world, and from 81 countries. They stand for food sovereignty. They stand for the small farmers that produce food in diversified ways, within ecological limits. They practice agroecology, and they are the most vocal people on criticizing big agribusiness, GMOs, agrochemicals, and they have very good analysis on WTO and free trade treaties. It's an interesting thing, but in the global south, and particularly with farmers, people are much more aware of those globalizing mechanisms that we are in the West, because we are not at the forefront. On the bad side, we are not there having some mining company just outside our door, or someone felling all our trees or killing the activists. Well, many of us haven't experienced that, no? So that's an organization, that's a movement really to be reckoned with. With that, in Latin America, the agroecology movement is very big. I don't think we have it so much in Europe, no? Here we have the permaculture movement, like in Australia, but in Latin America and in Africa, it's the agroecology movement, which is also more than, it's organic, but more, there's more land management, and it's also quite politicized. It goes along with a social movement, and they also stand for food sovereignty. Jen, I mean, when I haven't talked about Jen because you know more about Jen than I do, but when I go to other places and talk about movement, I always mention Jen. And for me, Jen is like a perfect seedbed for a new economy, no? All these eco-villages. I think maybe I'm including my own eco-village. We need to be better at advocating for economic change and maybe sort of be a bit more economic literate. But, you know, where would you go? 5 minutes, okay. So where would you go to get all that knowledge and practices of alternative from eco-technology to growing? And so above all, I think the organizational, you're learning new governance, new ways of living together. You'd go to the global eco-village movement, no? And transition towns that played a huge and important role in its time. And that we've got movements here, represented here, economies, the European Network for Community-Led Initiatives on Climate Change and Sustainability, and REPERS, the International Network for Solidarity Economy. And there are lots of other movements, the degrowth movement, the positive money movement, the organizations like WEALL, the Wellbeing Alliance, the Economy for the Common Good. All of these are sort of, in one way or another, working for systemic change. Yeah, let's systems, yeah. And there are movements that we probably never heard of, like I'm familiar with something sort of vaguely called the slow living movement in Japan, which is a tendency of young people, very well educated, signed up, maybe they already have a career, that are rejecting that lifestyle and wanting to live a slower, more meaningful life, moving to rural areas, maybe working part-time to have more time for being together, for playing, for singing, for doing other things, more meaningful things with other people. And in China, there's something known as the rural reconstruction movement. We don't hear a lot about what's going on in China, but there are also things going on there that we are unaware of. And we as Local Futures, when we talk about taking action, what can we do? We have sort of landed on 5 things that we think can help effective activism and building healthy communities. We call them the 5 R's. So the first is reconnect, the second is rethink, the third is resist, the fourth is renew, and the fifth is rejoice. I'll talk about that now. Reconnecting is about reconnecting to others and nature. And I think all of you, I'm sure, are doing that beautifully. Many are alone. I mean, certainly in Western culture, we were brought up to thinking independence is the best quality we can have, not interdependence. No? So it's about changing the I to a we so that we feel better and so that we can be more effective. And rethinking progress and development. As I mentioned before, how do we measure progress today? What do we see as development? And kind of busting the myth about the global economy. No? And resisting, I talked a bit about that. Many of the communities, I said, that are the forefront are the ones that are resisting the most, because they have got destruction on their doorstep. And that's not right. If we want political change, systemic change, we need to start resisting the global corporate economy. And to building up to that critical mass. And maybe, in my opinion, one of the most important things we can do is to spread the word. I mean, it's kind of educating ourselves and educating others. Renewal on a local level. Well, that's what a lot of us are involved in already. And I think when people aren't really involved, I always say, look to local food first, because being part of the local food movement is an easy way, an easy step in, and can have big consequences. We all need food every day, 3 times a day, and it's something that can be very powerful, and that can make, where we can see change very quickly. And the big picture activism there with the resist and the renew of making the invisible visible, and that's the 2 sides of the coins, unmasking the global economy and showing and showcasing what's already going on. Because a lot of people that haven't had any experience with alternatives, they are stuck in their mind with the vision presented to us by marketing, which is usually very high tech and, totally divorced from life, or the futuristic dystopian visions that you see in science fiction films. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, and particularly the young. That's what they're stuck with. Oh, well, we can't do anything about it because we're going to end up out there, sort of somewhere between Mad Max and some other film, no? And then there's the 5th one, rejoice. We need to celebrate life and all the beauty that is still with us, and also remember to celebrate our small victories, our steps on the way. We get so caught up, all of us, in making change, and we forget to say, hey, we did something. We have to sort of realize that we are in the middle of a huge process of transformation. And Ida was mentioning something about, I think it was a dying system, which maybe not exact those words, but I think we are witnessing a dying system, even though we think of it as the norm, as status quo. A bit like the Roman Empire that throws the biggest parties at the very end, no? Yeah. And on that note, on the rejoicing note, I think I'll end.